Robin Hollander's career has included Avatar, Avengers Endgame, The Wilds, and Eternals. And the new project is Cocaine Bear. Robin, the movie is called Cocaine Bear. No disrespect to any of the great cast members because it has an amazing cast. But if the bear of the title is not incredibly great and just created in such a incredible fashion, I don't think the movie works at all. So I guess like, how did you start in terms of creating basically the central figure in the film, the titular character, I guess, right? So what were the first conversations like with you and Elizabeth in terms of making this come to life?
I think the first conversations we had were actually in November 2021. And, the world was in a sort of a pretty weird place at that time. And I think no one quite knew. Oh, sorry, 2020, I think. I'm getting my dates wrong because it was a bit of a blur. But we all met up in a room on our end. Obviously, New Zealand, the pandemic was handled slightly differently and slightly more sort of lockdownish early on. So we all had the luxury of being in a room together. And then we had this sort of multitude of Zoom icons pop up. And I think that blew Liz's mind first off the bat, like just seeing how many people we had around one table. So it was a pretty wild time. And I think that sort of set the tone for the whole project, which was ultimately a really fun collaboration between us on this end and Liz on her end before we could actually finally meet in person and shoot this movie. And it's good that you mentioned Koki, the title of character, because that was the one thing that Liz sort of said from the word go is, she needs to look real. She needs to be believable, but at the same time, we need to have her character down to a T. So she's not bloodthirsty. She just loves her Coke. And if she runs out of Coke, or if you get between her and the Coke, or her and her cubs, that's when bad things happen. So that was sort of the brief that we had from the get-go. And then I think we just had a really fun time in exploring what makes a real bear and then what makes a real cokehead and how do you combine the two. It couldn't be too human. It couldn't be too animalistic and too sort of Nat Geo doco style. And that's where we had a lot of fun for a couple of months in just sort of shaping this character with Liz and obviously with the team on our side here, various tests, various studies, lots of reference into what cocaine would do to the body or to an animal, as far as you can obviously reference that. And yeah, I think we came up with a pretty fun result.
It's incredible because one of the things I love about watching the film is that there's such weight to I know this maybe sounds silly, but I was like, there's such, it feels like it's real, right? You know what I mean? Like in the scenes and everything, there's like such a weight to it. And I feel like sometimes I'll see CG or movies like characters that are computer generated and they don't feel like that. They don't feel like they're that physically imposing in the scenes. And I guess like how much trial and error went into like calibrating that to like make sure it worked with like the physical actors that are there. You know what I mean? Like that kind of thing.
Yeah, a lot. And I'm glad you picked up on that because I think for me, that's the hallmark of CG when it's not quite right is the lack of weight. Have these big creatures absolutely rampaging through a shot and your mind is telling you that it looks real and a still frame you might go, that's a real thing. But then in motion you go, but something about it isn't quite right. So for me, it was the weight, and for my animation supervisor, it was the weight as well. And we really tried to build a system that sort of would give it a heft that she needed. And we looked into it. So one obviously is a sort of a performative aspect. Does she move like she's heavy? Okay, cool. Check. We've got that. And then how does that translate back through the rig that we build? And as with any creature we build, you start with the skeleton, you have muscles, we have a fascia that goes over the top. And that sort of gives you that first level of jiggle, if you will. It's all the muscle deformations and the transfer of weight. We then sort of added a skin slab over the top of it, which is like a layer of fat, if you will. And that could slide around a little bit more. So there was lots of trial and error there in painting stiffness maps and making sure that, you'd get jiggled when you wanted to, but not jiggle when you didn't. And that is really just trial and error. So if a gust of wind makes her jiggle, she doesn't look heavy, even though the system kind of works. And obviously, if she walks and nothing jiggles, then we didn't push it quite far enough. So you had that. Then we put a layer of skin over the top, which is sort of the rug that ties the room together. And then ultimately fur. And again, the fur is really what makes the whole jiggle and the muscles and the way it read, which adds an extra layer of complexity because the fur in itself obviously has bend and flex and that will move. But the underlying skin had to move, which then meant the underlying fat had to move and the underlying muscle had to move. So it was a bit of a puzzle to get it all right. But we ended up with a system, I think, that we could really fine tune based on the performance. And even then, we quite often had to lean into animation to sort of ham up the impact a little bit more, just to sort of trigger the systems a bit more and give it that weight.
Right. you mentioned the fur too. I was thinking the other thing was like how the cocaine looks on her fur, right? And like and around her snout. Again, just awesome. It's so like really well detailed and looks like completely real, basically, right? Like what I would imagine a bear doing cocaine would look like. So I guess like
Yeah.
like what, I like, do you have reference points for that? Or like how did you kind of like get it so like the fur and like it would look real, like kind of around the snout, I guess.
Yeah. I petitioned for the budget to go up so we could do some accurate reference shoots, but we couldn't quite stretch it that far. So it was mostly flour on animal fur. So I've sort of got I've got a little dog and I had a big dog at the time. So they had to sort of stand in for some reference shoots that we did. Be it flour sort of spilt all over their fur, or in the instance of my big dog, which was a boxer, we put some coconut oil on his nose and had him sort of lick it off. So a lot of the early case studies, not just with the look of the cocaine, but I guess just the behavior, trying to get something off your nose, be it coconut oil or cocaine, was sort of in part driven by some of our pets, some online sort of research. There's tons of clips of dogs getting into a bag of flour. So yeah, there was a bit of fun and trial and error and sort of trying to get, I guess, the granularity of the cocaine right. If it's too chunky, it doesn't quite look right. If it's too thin, then it just looks like you have an old bear that's got gray fur. So it was a bit of trial and error, but I think in the end, it came together really nicely. And it was actually a combination of the palette, so the look depth side of things, driving the actual shading on the tips of the fur, and then obviously effects simulations on top. So actual particles that sort of land on the fur and travel with Koki as she moves through a shot. And then also a little bit of compositing, just sort of, grading in little areas, lifting up some values, and just adding a little bit of that sort of the last 5%, if you will, to tie it all together.
Yeah. I want to ask you too. Obviously, we're talking about the creation. There's so many like great set pieces in the film too. Obviously, like there's and the. I mean, I'm sure you probably talked about just the ambulance chase is an incredible action sequence, and it's just so many different aspects of it that feels like are very much something that you had to like create, not just with the bear, but with like the ambulance probably itself, and like the way the even like I mean, the bodies are falling, all these different things that feel like they're all like part of this incredible like CG sequence basically. And it looks again, like it looks great. Like I don't know how people would look flying at it. The whole thing, like I'm suspending disbelief that this is what it looks like, but that's what it feels like it would look like. So I guess like when you were kind of like going into that sequence, the big, the chase with the ambulance, I guess like, yeah, how was that like I mean I'm assuming you were like that was like a show stopping kind of thing or whatever, but like what was that process like, and like how did you kind of like make it look how it does in the end?
Yeah, so I actually think COVID in a weird way was a benefit to us there, because our pre-production period was fairly substantial while the whole world was trying to figure out how we shoot a movie during these sort of testing times. So the previous beat that we did for that was fairly extensive. It was the main previous beat that we did for the whole movie. And so we had a lot of back and forth with Liz and her team and us on our side, and sort of spitballing ideas and coming up with angles. And then when we actually managed to shoot it in Ireland, I think the execution of the crew on the ground was, spot on. They had everything in place to sort of make that previous really come through. So it was a combination of practical on-set ambulance. I think they sourced an ambulance from Germany, flew that over, shipped it over to Ireland, and they were sort of fanging that through a forest in Ireland with Scott Seiss, who plays one of the paramedics, who's a stand-up comedian, never acted before in his life. And they got him in because of some of the videos he's been doing, and Liz really loved him. And he was just game for everything. Like they literally strapped him to the back of the ambulance, flying through a forest in Ireland while, everyone was yelling at him, and he's sort of hanging off the back, pretending to be chased by a bear. So I think if you have a performance like that as your starting point, you're already laughing. There was also some set pieces that we shot on stage, also in Ireland. So that was an ambulance, same ambulance really. And we had him, initially we had him on this sort of hydraulic pad, and it was just too much. So we just had a bunch of big grips and metal pipes and sort of rocked the ambulance a little bit. And those are all of our sort of internal studio set takes, if you will. And then it was just combined with some photography that we shot on the same location where the actual chase happened, just going up and down the road, tiling out the scene, making sure we had all angles covered so we could sort of stitch it all together. And then it was really just, trial and error again, getting Koki in there, making it believable. A lot of people sort of, when they saw the movie, say like, well, the thing that fell apart for me is how fast she was running. Like, no way could she chase that bear. which isn't true. Like there's tons of videos of black bears, you know, doing 30-mile-an-hour sprints, and it's terrifying. So we figured if they can go 30 miles an hour without cocaine, you know, maybe we can sort of up it a tiny bit, make it a little bit more dramatic. And then it came together really well. And then there's obviously the big sort of climatic shot where we hit a tree and there's a digi-double takeover. So Beth, the ambulance driver, goes flying through the windscreen. That one, in essence, was just a bit of trial and error. It's trying to get the camera moves right on the day. We had the actress playing Beth sort of lying on the floor and basically rolling into an end position. And again, we had really great previs for that, which we used internally to sort of get the physics of her coming out the windscreen right. And then we could show the actress and say, look, this part, this hookup is what we'll do digitally. We just need you to start in this position, roll into this position. It meant the camera operator had something to focus on. And, you know, there's a few takes to get it right, a few trenches dug to get the camera low enough. And I think all the pre-production work we've done really came together. So it was a sum of all parts that made it work.
That's amazing. Yeah, really, it's an incredible. It's a great scene. And the end of that scene, it's just great. The whole thing is just great. I feel like we talk about this for a while, but we do have to wrap it up. Robin Hollander, the visual effects for Cocaine Bear. Thank you so much. It was great chatting.
Thank you. Appreciate it.